this introductory video, I'll share the purpose of the channel and some of the approaches we'll take to paying closer attention to words that can support personal growth and a more gracious way of living. Hi everyone, thanks for joining me at Grace in the Rough Studios. My name is Evie G. Grace in the Rough is actually a brand of digital studios. Today we're at the Word Thoughts Studio. And the Word Thought Studio offers reflections on life and encourages practices that may help you, me, anyone find and feel more grace in our lives. First video is going to be, keep it pretty simple, but there'll be a lot more to come about the brand and the process way we do things and the story and everything. A lot more to come about that. So we're just going to go over the basics today. So we're here in the park. I'm in Florida. It's pretty cool here today for Florida. It's breezy, really nice weather. So for those of you up north, you might appreciate that. I actually miss the snow. I prefer the snow, but Florida is way too hot for me. But today is really nice, and we're here in a really awesome park that I do a lot of photography work here and video work and stuff. So you'll probably see that in the future. But as far as the brand, Grace in the Rough, the approach is very iterative and agile as it evolves. In the Word Thought Studio, we work obviously with words. It's not a Christian channel, even though it says grace and we talk about word. We're not talking about the Christian word, and we're not talking about grace necessarily in the sense of Christian theology. We're talking about finding grace in our lives, and we'll get into all that. But the Word Thought Studio works with words, particularly character traits or states of being, and defining them and examining them as ways of prompting thought of how we can bring more grace into our lives and improve our lives through personal development and self-reflection and self-care, things like that. And then we offer practices and approaches that you might want to try for yourself that I know I've been working with. My job is to present those things for you, examine the words and traits we'll be reflecting on, and the definition, and then offer insights and things, experiences and examples and things that I've come across working with this type of approach. I didn't find the approach anywhere. This is just the approach that I've worked with because I am primarily a writer. At the core, I'm a writer, and I'm really honoring that. This channel is really more of an accompaniment to my blog, which you can see linked down below for. And there's a lot of long form writing there. I'm up on the reflections that complement what we do here. I'm also an educator. I really lived in the learning and development space for many years, particularly the past decade. That's kind of over now. So really I'm focusing on writing and language and words and personal development after I've been through a great deal in the past 2 or 3 years, basically lost everything. So it's helped me reflect more deeply, and I'm just bringing some of those thoughts and shares with you. Just a little bit about how I work, because you're not going to find really fast energy here. I'm pretty mellow. I use note cards. I talk kind of slow. So if that's going to bother you or anything, then this may not be the channel for you. So I'm kind of new to social media. I've never really been on social media before as far as posting things that I'm saying, and I've never even had a blog before. I don't necessarily follow the algorithm way of doing things. I pay attention to it because that's how things work to a certain extent, but I've always had some resistance to that. I call it the algorithm, but I have my go rhythm. So I follow my go rhythm, and so I'm not sure how the channel's going to do. I'll talk about that a little more in a minute, but I'm just being true to myself about this, and we'll see how that evolves. So this spot I chose here in the park has turned out to be really active, so I'm getting all kinds of interruptions. It was perfectly quiet while I'm trying to set up and everything, and as soon as I start recording, the whole world seemed to show up. So I may have some breaks here. I apologize, but
Yeah, so I did have an online store before. That's really the only social media presence that I've ever really worked with online. I did have an online business and I absolutely loved it. It was an online dropship store back in 2014. I started that. I learned a ton from it. I didn't really have any idea what I was doing, and it didn't end up working out, but I might relaunch it later because I still have it. It's still a really cool thing. And the only real online thing I did, that I had a blog, I did have a blog for that, and a Facebook page. And that was so much fun. But I don't personally use social media. But the reason I chose to do a YouTube channel was because right now I'm create this brand, because when I was working with my business as a brand, it just made me so accountable, and it made me have to push myself all the time to learn more, to try stuff, to just do stuff, right? And over the past 2 to 3 years, I've pretty much lost everything. I lost my career. I lost all my money. I lost my car. I lost a place to live. I ended up in a homeless shelter for a while, not because of any addictions or not because of any bad anything, just because I literally couldn't get a job, ran out of money, and was in a homeless shelter for this past summer. Right now, you finally did get out of that, and a family member is letting me stay with them, but I'm by no means out of the rough yet. So I'm still working with how to get out of that. I am going to start a job in a week or so for the first time in a year. I haven't had a job and be able to find anything for a year. That's a really long story, and I'm going to post on the blog about some of that. But channel is going to hold me accountable to being true to the brand as best I can, and that it certainly has evolved into that. I thought it was going to be something completely different, and it came to be this what I'm doing now, and that's not how it started. So I've really had to listen to that, and I'm going to continue to do that because it's really feels good to be able to do that. Plus, getting on video and posting myself in video is very new for me. The writing part isn't so new, but I do consider the channel more of a compliment to the writing, because at the core, as I said, I'm a writer. I write mostly fiction. My nonfiction, one of the Grace in the Rough Studios, is going to probably be a knowledge hub base for things I write for nonfiction about topic pieces. I've done a whole big series about e-bikes and that whole genre of transportation because I just got one. I was been fortunate enough to be able to finally get some form of transportation. I haven't had a car for 2 years. That's been really hard, but it's something I talk about, but I'm going to talk about that on a different place. Yeah, so the Word Thought Studio, we're going to examine words that are usually associated with character traits, maybe personal development, that kind of thing. So I'm going to give you a little example of how that process will work. But we're not going to, just for the example, we're not going to use a character trait word because that can get too into things. We're just going to use a fun word. We're going to use one of the words of the year that Merriam-Webster's dictionary chose. Word of the year is slop. So I thought that would be a fun start just to show the format and go into that and see how that works. It's not meant to be preachy about how to use the dictionary. We are going to look at how that is used and why that's helpful to us, but it's not meant to be a lesson or teach you how to use the dictionary. But if you don't know too much about that, it can be very helpful. But we are going to look at how the dictionary, the things that it provides, are going to help us examine the word and then just reflect on what that means to us and how we can incorporate that into our lives with more conscious thought.
Hi, yeah. So for fun, we're gonna sometimes look at the hard copy of the dictionary or thesaurus or any other books that might be helpful. And just for fun, I pulled out this dictionary, very old. I've had it on my shelf for many years. Webster, which is now Merriam-Webster. This is a second edition of the collegiate edition. So it's kind of cool. We're just going to kind of show how the way a dictionary is used and stuff hasn't changed. Even though we may be using the dictionary online, it's still going to show and pretty much in the same order because that's how the entry is read. If you look up a word, you get the pronunciation, you get the parts of speech, you may get some inflections to the word, um, the etymology, which I love to look at and can be really informative. The etymology is where the word came from, the history of the word. You get, of course, the definition and the different types of definitions and how that sort of evolved, and they're called the senses of the word. So that's kind of what we're showing here today, because a new sense of the word slop has been added to the definition of that word. You get labels, which kind of give you a little more in-depth insight into the history of the word. You get idiomatics, and you get synonyms, and a bunch of other stuff you can get. You don't get the antonyms there, which is where you get those in the thesaurus. So we're all definitely going to use that as well. So this is the entry from that dictionary. As you can see, it's old. I cleaned up just or erased a picture that was in relation to the previous entry to confuse things here. So slop does give us a little bit of a pronunciation. It's a noun, parts of speech. It tells us a little bit of the history. This is the history, like Middle English. It was spelled this way. Back as far as Old English, it could be used in combination with slip, as in sleep, S-L slipe, back in the day. Okay. These are the senses, the definition senses. So they're little distinctions of the definition. And they make sense to what we are pretty familiar with, watery mud, slush, watery snow, a puddle of spilled liquid. This is probably the one I relate slop to the most in most recent use, like a semi-liquid food that is unappetizing or of poor quality because have to eat slop on Big Brother. And that's like when I think of slop, that's what I think of like most recently, right? Um, but yeah, like feeding the pigs slop, like feeding the pigs. And then it can be used as a verb also. So it's to slop is the infinitive. So I slop on my makeup. I slopped through the mud. I'm slopping through the rain. So to spill or splash or yeah. So I don't think the word has changed that much. The way it's used, maybe in different contexts sometimes, but still used the same way until now. A new sense to the definition of the word and how it's applied is being added to the vocabulary. Yeah. And just for a little bit more fun, I don't know if it's just supposed to be a joke, but in this image off of the article announcing the word of the year as slop on the Merriam dictionary, word is misspelled as wood. I don't know if that's supposed to be a funny or I don't know, but I don't know if you noticed that, but anyway, all right. So, ta-da! Here is the new definition. Uh, Usually, the senses go in order of the most recent understanding and definition of the word. Not always, but Merriam-Webster does go in the order of the most recent. So the official new definition, a sense of the definition, is a digital content of low quality that's produced usually in quantity by means of artificial intelligence. It gives a couple of examples in sentences and slop can now be found anywhere from unsettling images on Facebook of Jesus fused with prawns to poorly written Kindle books. And then here's an example of a label, and it's saying that it's used rather broadly, um, a product of little or no value. And then the nice thing about, online sites is they can kind of move things around more, so you get, um, synonyms a lot of times next to the sense, of the word, which can be really helpful, and watching the usual slop on TV gives it an example of it being used in a phrase, and then it goes on to, the countdown, which were used to be the number 1 A, is now B.
and they're even moving down what used to be number one meaning for slop back in the 1700s is now moved all the way down to number two as soft mud slush. And if you recall, it was like the number one meaning when we looked back in the 80s version, I think it was, or the older dictionary version. So things move around. It's, of course, still a noun. Um, but I thought this was interesting because a second version of it as a noun, which what didn't show in the printed dictionary part entry we looked at, was it being used in reference to clothing, and it referenced to men's wear in the 16th century, um, articles of clothing. So I thought that was pretty interesting. Articles also sold to sailors, so that's something we hadn't heard before. It's I still a noun,
Slop.
and that's how it was said. Know if you heard that. And then it gives a little more in-depth information here in terms of its use as a verb, right? Transitive and intransitive use of it as a verb. So that is helpful. And over here, we talked about how to read the dictionary and the different sections that can be, given in, and they're all here. And you can drill down into them easily, and you can go right into the etymology, which is a lot more extensive here on an online version. Not always, but it usually is, which is great, as opposed to just the dictionary, right? So here we can get into dates. It defines, Middle English dictionary, able to relate back to that, tentatively defines the word as muddy waters. And then in the Middle English, also now we're really getting into how it was referred to as a garment, and really explains that going back to Germanic, Dutch, High German, and really kind of getting into it. And then a little bit less about the verb, but certainly gives us a whole lot more context and information. Now we can see that what we thought was even in the article talked about that it was in the 1700s. This is even saying it is back further to this 15th century, 14th century, which is 1557 as a verb. So it really drills down in a lot more on some of these online sites, which I like a lot. And use it, what phrases it's used in, words that rhyme. And then if you want to get into antonyms, you switch to the thesaurus, and you can see you scroll down, and a lot of times antonyms are provided towards the end of the um, options here. So we'll probably talk about this more, but so pick, peck, nibble. So instead of being sloppy and slushy, it's more picky, or it's more defined, right? As a noun, it's a thing that's more defined. It's more, solid, basically. So that's just an overview. That's the new word of the year, slop. This is just a way to give you an overview of kind of how we're going to go over words, things we're going to look at, and there'll be a lot of other things, and we'll go a lot faster. This is just to give you a format of kind of how the word reviews will look and how we'll approach them, and things we'll dig into in order to get to the real meaning of things. And that was it. So if it was a little bit fun and sort of interesting, that's how we're going to at least present the words, and then there'll be other ways that we do the reflections and talk about how we incorporating those things into our life. And I'll give examples and maybe some exercises. And there's a lot of things coming up. Materials and that kind of thing that the brand is going to provide. So, but we'll just get started there. And of course, it accompanies the blog. So the blog will have a lot, even more in-depth stuff to think about, to read about, to think about, to reflect on, if you choose to do that, if that's what you're into like me. So if it was interesting or catches your curiosity at all, of course, like and subscribe. Appreciate that. The next episode, we're going to get into it. We're going to explore the name of the brand because that can prompt a lot of things. Grace, of course, rough, what does that really mean? And reflect on those things and have some prompts for that. That'll probably take a couple of videos or two. We're going to reflect on the motto and the logo of the brand. So we're going to go over those things because the name, the logo, the motto, all are of the brand, all really encompass the they really embody the approach. So of encouraging, self-reflection and practices to help us all find and feel more grace in our lives. So thanks for joining me. I'm Evie G, and we'll see you next time. Thanks.